Hello, social studies teachers. Welcome to Analytical Rubric Writing for Social Studies. I'm your host today, Katie Seago. Before we get started today, I need you to make sure that you have these documents available to you. You will want them in front of you. These all came from our Professional Development Day from February 18th. The first one you'll need is the Identifying Important Performance Qualities. These documents can be found either in the packet that you received on February 18th. They could also be found in the Canvas course Professional Development at both buildings. Criteria and rubric ideas. This is where we have the 4 types of performance criteria listed with traits. This document has 2 figures on it, figures J4 and J6. One has questions that you can refer to. The other has descriptive terms for differences in degrees. And then finally, you need a rubric. Get all those out before we get started. The first step in the process is to revisit your stage 1 of the unit. Today we're going to be using the Civics and Government unit from 8th grade. Their transfer goal says that students will be able to independently use their learning to understand our federal system of government so that in the future they will be able to make informed decisions and become active participants in our democratic society. If you would like more time to read through the meaning and acquisition of knowledge and skill for this unit, please pause the video and do so now. Your second step of the process is to read through your performance task again. Remind yourself what you're asking students to do and what important things they'll be completing. A little disclaimer here, this is actually a performance task that is under construction at this time. So while it may not be used in its entirety, we're still going to use it as an example for our rubric writing. Go ahead and pause the video and read through this page, then push play, read the second page as the video is paused, and once the second page is read, push play one more time. The highlights that are there were just my marking the text as I was reading through, it allowed me to keep track of what was most important. So obviously our students are creating some sort of campaign that will hopefully engage other people into correcting something that they feel is an issue right now. Obviously, the student needs to have strategies in order to overcome the issue, and they also need to connect it to historical similarities. My next step of the process is part 1 of the Identifying Important Performance Qualities. This is something that will be done individually. Part 1 is done by yourself. While I'm using this document, I'm going to be using the next criteria and rubric ideas to help me through my thinking. At the time of this brainstorming, I am not concerned what's in which criteria column. I don't care if it's from content or process, quality, result, does not matter right now. What I am concerned about are the traits that are listed there. So individually list the important qualities or traits for, I would say that this is their campaign. I'm looking at what's important in their campaign. What traits do they need to have? So I'm using that criteria and rubrics idea document. Now I'll tell you right now, I think your kids are doing a lot in this performance task. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is I will be using more than just the blanks that are provided. Here we go then. The first word that I come across going through my columns here, I think it's important. So the word accurate. I think their information obviously needs to be accurate. I think it should be insightful. We need to go beyond surface level. It needs to make connections between today and history. Needs to be relevant. The issue should be relevant. Okay, that's it for the content column. Moving on to process. First word is coordinated. Their effort needs to be coordinated. Can't just be throwing things out. They have to think about the process that they need to follow. It should be logical then. Should be organized and planned. Kind of the same thing. It should be sequential. Okay, that's it for that column. In the quality column, the first thing that really comes to mind that I think is important, well, yeah, it should be attractive, but how important is that? I think it's more important that it's polished and well-crafted. Okay, final column should be convincing, if I can type. It needs to be engaging. If I'm trying to ask people to jump on board with me, I need to engage them. Should be memorable and persuasive. So now that I have created this on my own, I've determined what I think is important, it's time to move on to the next step, which is part 2. So with my group now, with my PLC, we need to agree on 4 to 6 of the most important traits. They get listed at the bottom of that page. As I said before, since this performance task has so many pieces to it, it was really hard for me to whittle this to only 6 traits. Obviously, as a PLC, you're going to have those conversations. So we're pretending at this point that conversation has taken place. We've decided on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 instead of just 4 to 6. I think that's okay given the task that the students are being asked to accomplish. So taking a look at these, I'm going to group these here really quickly to help me move to that next step of creating the rubric. And accurate, makes connections, and relevant, these all come from the content column. Pardon my chicken scratch. And then logical and sequential, they come from the process column. Polished comes from quality. And then finally, convincing and engaging comes from the result. So here's the deal. This means that we have 4 criteria through which we are assessing our students' mastery of the transfer and of the information in stage 1, their knowledge and skill. That's a lot. Just so you know, for future purposes, you do not have to assess through all 4 criteria. You could choose 2, you could choose 3, but I felt like it was really necessary to have all 3 of these included. So when I think about what the content means with this assignment, and that it needs to be accurate, and that it needs to make connections, and that it needs to be relevant, I feel like I'm just thinking through just another step further here, that the information that's being used was accurate and connections were made. With the logical and sequential, that's their process of their campaign. Did it make sense in the order that they proceeded? They did one thing before they did the other. Should they have done that in reverse order? The polished is the quality of the product that's being put out there. And then finally, the result, was it effective? Were they persuasive? Did they get people to jump on the bandwagon with them? At this point, I'm really ready to start writing my rubric. This document here is the one that I'll use to help me through. Now, very quickly, let me tell you here, figure J4 is something that I think would be helpful to use if you feel stuck. So when you're working through the traits that you deem that are important, if you feel like, I'm really not sure if I'm going down the right path here, use these questions to help guide your thinking. Since I felt like we're okay moving forward with what we have, I'm just going to go ahead and I don't need to refer to that right now. So now I'm just looking at figure J6. And this is the document that gives us those differences in degree that will help us, those stems that will help us create the rubric. I'll have this out by my side as I'm writing the actual rubric. And for me, this is where it starts to get fun. So we're ready to start filling in this rubric. Now remember, this is just a rough draft here, so the document that we actually give the students will be cleaned up, will look much better. The understanding that my students are demonstrating their mastery through or their transfer through would be the facet of perspective. And their specific product or performance really is going to be their campaign. Okay, moving from that, then I need to think about the criteria that I've chosen. And I've chosen content. And when I think about what that content is, I'm thinking about whether it's accurate, whether it's making connections, or it's relevant. I really think I'm still just going to call that column content. I think our kids know what that means. Then my process column is going to be where I am focused on if they were logical and sequential. And so I'll call this, I'll be a little more specific for them here. I'm going to call this the campaign process. Okay. Moving on then, my other two columns that I'll be focusing on is the quality. And in this case for students, I think I'll call that the quality of media. So they're going to, that tells us what quality we're looking for. And then finally the result category. And I think the word that might make best sense for our students would be the impact. What impact did their campaign have? Or does it have the potential to make some solid impact? At this point, I'm skipping the weights category or row. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm ready to start putting some of my thoughts down here in the rubric. Again, this is a rough draft, so we might make changes after everything is written. Okay, so going back to content, I want their information to be accurate. I want them to make connections to historical events or event. I want it to be relevant, the issue to be relevant in today. So I'm really looking at my differences in degree right now. I guess I'm looking for degrees of understanding, whether it's thorough or not. So those are the stems that I'll be using here. So here we go. I think that they should be thorough. They should have relevant information, relevant and accurate. I have a hard time typing that word apparently. Examples with connections to the past. Okay, that seems kind of simplistically stated right now. I'm okay with it though, since I'm just at the beginning of building my rubric here. Okay, I'm going to go down now thinking of my continuum of learning. I'm now looking at my 3, using my differences in degree. The next one down is substantial. So I'm going to say that they have substantial and generally accurate examples with connections to the past, or you might say to a historical event, whatever you guys feel most comfortable with. Okay. The 2 then would be partial or incomplete. So I'm going to say that they have partial examples connected to the past. And then finally, my 1 says that they have misunderstandings or serious misconceptions. So I like serious misconceptions more. Serious misconceptions or lack of connections to the past. All right, so that first column is built. Done. Poof, moving on. I'll come back to it later to see if I like how it's all worked out. Now I'm ready to move on to the campaign process. And with the campaign process, I'm thinking about if students are they thinking about the way they reach out to the public? Are they logical? Are they sequential? Do they do one thing before they do the next thing in the way that it should be done? So I'm going to say that goes with the differences in degrees. I think that goes with always and consistently. So I'm going to say consistently. Consistently uses logical or employs logical. I like uses because I think that's friendlier for student talk there. So consistently uses logical and sequential material that's appropriate for the task. Okay? Seems simple enough. I can assess that. My next one then down would be frequently. And I'm really using the rest of everything else that I've already said. So they frequently uses logical and sequential material appropriate for the task. Okay? Next one down after frequently would be occasionally or sometimes. So occasionally uses logical and sequential material appropriate for the task. And then finally, we're going to say rarely. Now, I'll admit, when I was first writing this, I started thinking, do I want to say that the material is inappropriate for the task? No, because I'm using the word rarely. So rarely using logical and sequential material appropriate for the task would also imply that the material that they're choosing is inappropriate. So that's why I am not making that change in the sentences that I'm using. Okay, now I'm ready to move on for quality. So the quality of the media, I'm thinking about what they put out there. Is it something that is easy for the public to see? Is it easy for them to read? Is it flawless? What were the words here that I used? Is it polished? Because obviously if people are going to listen to us, we better put out some good stuff, right? So I think that fits with... let's see, the quality, I would say that goes with degree of clarity here, exceptionally clear, or it's easy to follow. So here we're saying that they are exceptionally clear and easy to follow material. And the reason why I'm just saying material is because it could be in a variety of different formats here. Delivered through appropriate technology. That's giving them the freedom here. My next column down, I'm saying that they are generally clear. Generally clear and able to follow material delivered through appropriate technology. So I don't like the way this is I don't like how this is going here. So what is generally clear, I guess, is my question. That's what's bothering me. So I'm going to say that the media is generally clear, and the viewer is able to follow material delivered through appropriate technology. Okay, so that means I do need to go up and make some changes in the previous box to match this one here. All right, so let me move that there. And then I would just say here, I just want to add that the media is exceptionally clear. Is exceptionally clear, you would change that E to lowercase, and is easy, and the viewer is easy, and it's easy for the viewer to follow material through the appropriate technology. There, I feel better about that. Okay, let's move that back into place. And then go on to number 2, where we want to say that it lacks clarity. Oh, what lacks clarity? I do. No kidding. The media lacks clarity, and the viewer is has difficulty following. Technology may not be appropriate for task. And then the last one is that the media is unclear and impossible to follow. Might change it that it's impossible for the viewer to follow. And then I'm also going to put inappropriate use of technology. Okay. So bear with me, we're on our last column here of impact or the result. When I think about the result, I'm thinking of its effectiveness. So was their campaign effective? What were some of the words that we had down here? We said that we wanted it to be convincing. We want it to be engaging, maybe persuasive or effective. So I'm going to use those degrees of effectiveness, starting with highly effective. Highly effective solution. Remember, that was something that they had to include that was provided. That the intended audience could act on to make a difference. That the intended audience could act upon to make a difference. Okay? I'll put that in its spot right there. The next one down then would just be generally effective. Solution that the intended audience could act upon. Oh. So the next part down is where we'll say somewhat. There's somewhat effective solution provided that the intended audience might be able to act on to make a difference. And then the last one is where we say that it's ineffective. So ineffective solution provided that the intended audience cannot act upon to make a difference. All right. And so there we have, sorry, technology sometimes. There we have our rough draft, basically, of our rubric. The next thing that I want to do before I go any further is take a look at all of my fours. And when I'm looking at all the fours, I want to ask myself the question, are all of these what a student would need to be able to do to show mastery of their transfer and the other information that's in stage 1? If my answer to that is yes, if these things in the fours cover everything that I feel is necessary to assess, all those traits that are necessary that a student would have to possess, then I'm ready really to just work on through my revision. If not, and by revision I just mean making it look good, double checking my word choice. If the answer is no, then what I need to do is go through and make some powerful changes. So you would stop to make that determination. I'm going to say yes for the sake of our work today. So my next step then is to take a look at the weights. What is most important to me here? Thinking of my transfer goal, thinking of all my stage 1 material, skills and knowledge. So I think really the content and the impact are the most important pieces here. Because of that, I'm going to weight them 3 times the other categories. I feel like their quality of the media is fairly important, but not as important, so I'll make that weight it 2 times. And their process, I'm just going to keep it face value. Now, what I would do is actually put these points into each of the cells of the rubric, so that your 3 times 4 would be 12. This would be worth 12 points. This would be worth 9. This would be worth 6. This would be worth 3. This would be 4. 3, 2, and 1, and so on for each of these. I'd do this out. So that way the math is done when I'm actually working on it with my students, with their work. Bear with me. This is the last slide. I promise this won't go on much longer. Few reminders before we close out here. Trust the process that I have taken you through. If you are struggling through your conversations about what's important, what's not important, this process will help you through. If you're not sure where to start, this process will help you. Trust it. Remember, it's a journey, like a little sailboat up there in the corner. The other thing is analytical rubrics, they do seem like a lot of work. They take a little bit of time to create. They take a little bit of time to use as a grading tool, but they're providing powerful feedback to the teachers and the students. Students are seeing actual words that go along. They can, with where they are, they're getting that verbal feedback. They get the visual feedback of where they are on the continuum of their learning. Are they a 4? Are they in the mastery? Or are they a novice with a 1? And then as a teacher, that gives you feedback in where your students are falling. Overall, if my students are only falling in the 3s and 2s in a certain criteria, then I know that that's something that I need to go back through and address with them. As always, as you're working through any of the process in UBD, if you have questions, never hesitate to ask either me or Shelly for help. We'd be more than happy to sit down with your PLC and work through something that you seem to be struggling with. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much for listening.